At the age of 30, Steve Jobs was forced out of Apple. He had built the company from his parents' garage, but by 1985, the board of directors decided he was no longer fit to lead it. In 1976, Jobs and Steve Wozniak started by manual assembling circuit boards. With the Apple II, they proved that computers could be personal appliances, creating a massive consumer market where none had existed before. But as the company scaled, Jobs' intensity became a liability. He was known for aggressive deadlines and a leadership style that many internal teams found erratic. He pushed for absolute perfection, but the resulting internal friction began to stall the company's momentum. Jobs had recruited John Sculley from Pepsi to provide corporate structure, but their relationship collapsed over pricing and product strategy. When the board was forced to choose between the founder and the executive, they chose to side with Sculley. Jobs was stripped of all operational power and eventually resigned. For a man whose identity was synonymous with Apple, this was a total public rejection, a complete erasure of his life's work to date. This forced exit began a 12-year period away from the company. To understand why his eventual return was so different, we have to look at the specific capabilities he built during his years in exile. Jobs' immediate reaction wasn't to chase a quick win to spite his critics. He stopped trying to prove he was a better businessman than the Apple board and turned back toward deep engineering interests. He founded Next, focusing on building high-performance workstations for higher education. He ignored mass-market pressure and spent years obsessing over the technical architecture of the operating system, an investment in engineering depth that would pay off a decade later. At the same time, he acquired a small, struggling graphics division from Lucasfilm. This company became Pixar, forcing Jobs to operate on a different timeline. Toy Story took 4 years to produce. During that cycle, Jobs wasn't just a financier. He was embedded in a culture that prioritized narrative structure and character development over hardware specs. He learned the patience required for long-term development cycles and saw firsthand how a compelling story could move a product. While Jobs was learning to manage creative talent and complex engineering at Pixar and Next, Apple was floundering. They had expanded into dozens of confusing product lines, from printers to handheld organizers, and were losing over $1 billion a year. Stepping out of the spotlight allowed Jobs to transform. He was no longer just the erratic founder who built the garage startup. He was becoming an operator who understood how to align technical precision with a clear narrative. When Apple acquired Next in 1997, it was a move of desperation. They needed the software Jobs had spent a decade building. Jobs returned first as an advisor, then quickly moved into the role of interim CEO. His strategy for the turnaround was immediate and surgical. He replaced the expansionist mindset of his youth with a methodology centered on subtraction. Apple sold dozens of disjointed Macintoshes and peripherals, essentially competing with itself. Jobs cut unnecessary products, shutting down entire divisions to clear the clutter. He focused the company on a vastly simplified lineup. By saying no to dozens of distractions, he regained the ability to focus on a few great ideas without compromise. This period established a new rule for his leadership. Operational focus is defined by what you refuse to build. This simplified structure allowed Apple to execute with a level of precision the industry hadn't seen. They stopped reacting to market trends and began dictating them. The iMac G3 was the first result. It was a single all-in-one machine that removed the floppy drive and prioritized a consumer-friendly design. It used the storytelling sensibilities Jobs honed at Pixar to market it as a lifestyle choice. The iPod and later the iPhone followed the same blueprint. They combined the deep software architecture Jobs developed at Next with a seamless hardware design, creating an ecosystem where the device and the media were perfectly integrated. These successes were the synthesis of his years in the wilderness. He took the technical depth of the Next operating system and wrapped it in the consumer-focused narrative approach he had seen succeed at Pixar. The chaotic founder who was fired in 1985 had finally become a disciplined operator. He was now able to manage disciplined execution and long-term product roadmaps with the same intensity he once used for garage-built circuit boards. His career shows that reinvention often requires the destruction of a previous professional identity. He had to lose his company to gain the skills required to actually lead it. Getting fired from Apple removed Jobs from an environment where he was no longer effective. It gave him 12 years of space he needed to build a new set of capabilities, turning a public failure into the foundation for the company's survival.